she could give a speech and talk about world peace all she wants to, but they're not going to remember that.
That's exactly right. You are exactly right. And that's the point, is that's what they remember, because your mind is taking pictures all the time. What's architecture really about? Archispeak is a show that dares to peek under the architectural kimono, exposing what architecture really is, what it is that architects really do, and show you why we are passionate about our chosen profession. I'm Evan Troxel. Join Neil Pan, Cormac Phelan, and me as we have a casual conversation about all things architecture, which includes all the stuff people don't talk about. Think you already know what architecture is really about? Tune in to find out. It's time for some Archispeak.
Welcome to episode 20 of the Archispeak Podcast. I'm Neil Pan.
I'm Evan Troxel.
And I'm Cormac Phelan.
And to start us off, Evan has our friends of the show for this episode.
All right. This week we had a $20 donation from the Die Hard Company. That's it for this week. One donation, but a good one. Die Hard Company. Thanks. We appreciate it. All right. So let's talk about architecture and photography this week. So playing a little bit off of an interview I did last week or the week before with No Veg. They hosted it online, and America McKeel and another woman, Emily from EHDD, joined us, Emily Bellows. We talked about presentation techniques, and one of the questions that came up during that conversation was, do you pay for professional photography after your projects are done? You know, how important is that? For when you're showing projects during presentations, but also how important is it to your marketing materials and stuff like that. And something that I've been kind of contemplating for a while is taking a little bit of a spin on that. I think we want to talk about that a little bit, but taking a little bit of a spin on that too is, do architects care about the building after it's been photographed? Because I think, I hear a lot of times, I hear people say, I wonder how that's going over there at that project, and I hear some people snidely say, "Who cares? It's already been photographed." So I don't know what you guys think about that, but I always think that that's kind of a typical response. I don't know if anybody really means it. I mean, maybe they do, but I hear that. What do you think?
To kind of go off of the first part of your thought,
yeah, too much. Sorry.
About no, that's great. But I mean, often I see a lot of people present their projects, and I've worked for places that present projects that are basically just photographs that they've taken, on a job site visit or something like that, and it's not well composed, no good lighting, and when you present it in, whether it's the website or, marketing material, it looks amateur. And I always worry, and I always think that the clients or potential clients look at it and think the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, you're going after projects that are like $30 million projects, $70 million projects, or even the small project. I mean,
a few thousand. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. You're trying to represent yourself in the best possible light. I mean, Neil, great example is your website has got some fantastic photographs of some of your projects. You're a sole practitioner, and you have got good photographs that illustrate your projects and what you can do and what you can bring to the table very professionally. And then I've seen people who've got 20 to 50 man firms that basically just have somebody who's got a Instamatic camera that goes out there and snaps a couple of shots during a field visit or something, or during a punch list, and they just look like crap, and then they use those as their marketing material, and you got to wonder why. I mean,
yeah,
that you've been paid well enough to go ahead and
Well, you should be budget. I mean, it should be part of that budget, I would think.
It should be. It should be, because I mean, this is stuff that, you should take pride in first. Then you should also use that as the, future marketing. And it's just, it baffles me.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with what you're saying. And I think that if you're not doing that, I think that those are mainly the things that clients care about. I don't think they care about plans. What they care about is referrals, right? What other people are saying about you, what's your reputation, and what does your work look like? Because that's really all you have. You could paint a picture, you could show sketches, you could show plans, but I think what people really want to do is they want to see how the architecture feels to them. And the only way to really do that is, number one, to go there. But number two, typically that's not going to happen. So they want to see photos of it.
Well, before they even take the step of going to look at some of your work, they're going to probably do a web search. They're going to find, your website. They're going to take a look at how you present yourself.
Yeah.
And if the way that you're presenting yourself to the public looks cheap and amateurish, then you probably aren't going to get a second look, or you're not going to get that second call of like, hey, we were interested in your possibly hiring you, but your website looks like crap.
You're not going to get that call.
Probably no. We should though, kind of call people out on,
that'd be helpful.
Because I'm sure you guys have gone to many architectural website, and those are like the good, bad, and uglies.
Well, I think or Cormac, thank you for saying so about the photography that is on my website, and that it was taken professionally. I have a friend of mine who's also an architect, but he's also a professional photographer, and he did one of my projects, just as a favor for me, and then another one of my projects, my client actually hired him because I recommended him, and they actually brought him down there twice. One time to do the inside and outside of the building that we did, and then they brought him down another time based on his suggestion to actually at a family event, and so he took photography of them actually in the building, using the building, and it was made for a family. And what's cool about that is they're now making a coffee table book based on his photography, and they've recently contacted me to get like sketches and some of the philosophy behind what we did and why we did things, and they're going to turn it into a book. But that's for that particular client, so they're spending a few dollars for this, obviously. But I was able to tag along, and they authorized me to use some of the photography, not with the family, but just without any people, to use on my website. So I didn't have to pay for that one. And so, I mean, that's a great way, that I was able to get that photography, was by suggesting, somebody who I knew, to actually do the photography, and then just kind of piggybacked on, hey, is the client okay with me using, and are you okay? I mean, he owns the images. So I had to get his authorization, and, that helped because he was a friend. So, but what's also interesting, let's turn this around a little bit, is that when another one of my projects that he shot as a favor to me, he actually used that photography on his site to actually, because he sells imagery of his photography, and it's not just architecture. He does landscapes and other still life and other things like that. And so he has a website where he sells these images, and he's actually sold some of the imagery that he took from my place. So that's kind of the way he worked out the payment issue in this case. So those are some ideas on maybe how you can get some photography if you're a sole proprietor. If you know somebody that can do good photography, or if you become friends with somebody through different networking opportunities, you meet some photographers, get to know them, find out a little bit about what they do, how they do it, and then see if you can work out something where you can recommend them, and maybe the client ends up paying for it, but you can get 4 or 5 or 6 different or good images that you can then use for your site. Because Cormac, I think what you said, you don't want to go out there and throw out, just cheap or horrible imagery, or the guys in the field takes a few snapshots. Oh, that, hey, that's halfway decent. We'll use that. And it's like, no, there's a big difference between somebody just grabbing a photograph and a professional photographer. And, it can make a huge difference.
Well, and a lot of times you're going to be going up against somebody else. And chances are your competition has professional photography.
Exactly.
And then what? It's like, okay, we're comparing apples and oranges here. It's obvious, right? And you don't get the nod, just like you get passed over immediately when it comes to that.
Yeah, I think it's hard when you're, a small firm to find a way to afford something like that. Just to go hire somebody is going to be, pretty expensive when you're not making a lot of money on a remodel. So, another thought that I've kind of employed a little bit as well, using a little bit of social media for this, is that on my my site's or my company's Facebook page, I'll post snapshots that maybe I've gone out to a job site and I see some interesting construction going on, or maybe just anything. And the way I kind of look at it is, if I'm just kind of posting a quick image to Facebook or to my company's Facebook site or to Instagram or to throw out on Twitter, those are kind of maybe more acceptable because you're just kind of sharing that.
Sure.
You're sharing it publicly,
Yeah,
but the idea is it's not your face to a potential client, and everybody kind of accepts, hey, these are just quick snapshots.
Well, that's That's behind the scenes. That's what architects should be doing. It's just part of their day-to-day is sharing that kind of stuff. And you're right, it's totally appropriate in that circumstance. But
exactly,
when we're talking about marketing, we're talking about professional images.
We're talking about standing suit and tie, standing in front of a client, doing the song and dance to sell who you are and what you can do. And you can't go in there, just kind of half-cocked and with poor imagery and, like the poor salesman speech and things like that. And that's what I think some of these bad photos do.
Well, if you're apologizing for your photos in your presentation, that's a pretty clear indication that there's a problem.
Exactly.
Well, I think it's really interesting because I've been a part of several of these kind of online marketing and interviews and webinars and whatever. And that question seems to come up on almost every one. Should I get my projects professionally photographed?
Yes.
And
yes.
The answer is always a resounding yes. And I know Mark LePage on Entree Architect has talked about it too. I mean, he should my work get photographed? And that's all he says is yes. And next question.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, you can't sit and explain it anymore to them other than, you could say yes, and sure they're going to ask why, and a lot of people are going to say, well, it's really expensive and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's more expensive to lose the project over bad representation.
That's a good way to put it.
And I mean, I worked for a firm in St. Petersburg, and they were, they had some good photography early on, but it wasn't, professionally done. And they made a conscious effort to completely redo everything that they did and go out and spend the money for each of the projects. And a lot of times it was built into the budget of the project that we will have these buildings, once they're finished, professionally photographed. And the photographs on their websites are absolutely incredible. I mean, you can see a lot of times that when somebody does like the photorealistic renderings and you look at it and you're like, wow, is that real or is that a rendering? I mean, you look at these photographs and you're kind of wondering, they just don't look real. I mean, they're just
that just happened to me. I just went out and had one of my projects photographed, and I was out there with the photographer, which I think is the only way to do it. And my wife looked at the photos and she's like, "That's real."
Yeah.
And I was like, usually it's the other way around. Usually you're looking at a rendering saying, is that real? But now you're looking at that and saying, that's a really nice rendering. And I thought, how odd, how the tables have turned, things have gotten so good.
Exactly. And, and the way that they market themselves, I mean, every time they go, and we can expound on that and, talk about consistency of what you're of how you're presenting each of these either photographs or, floor plans and stuff like that. And that's not really the point of what we're talking about. But, when you sit there and I remember the early photographs that we had, and we were in a presentation, and you're kind of standing there and you're looking at them, because this was, when I first got out of school, and they were taking me to kind of learn, just kind of observe presentations, and I'm looking at their presentation was fantastic. I mean, these guys knew how to get up there and sell and talk and do everything. But I was looking at their photographs and they were just horrible. I mean, they sucked. And I was just like, how you're up here and you're selling yourself and you're just, talking your heart out, but it's the image that
it's the beauty pageant.
Right. It's what kind of image are they going to take away from this? Yeah, he talked really good, but did you see those photographs?
Well,
Man,
and you
suck.
can complain all you want about how that wouldn't be fair and that's not what it should really be about, but it is.
It is.
That's what it's about. And I mean, that's why people watch beauty pageants on TV. I don't want to offend anyone. Miss Iowa or whoever is going to look amazing in a swimsuit. Right? And that's what she's being really judged on. It's like that's what people are watching for. They're not watching for.
She could give a speech and talk about world peace all she wants
right.
to, but they're not going to remember that.
That's exactly right. You are exactly right. And that's the point, is that's what they remember, because your mind is taking pictures all the time.
Exactly.
Well, and you hold on a second, Cormac. You bring up a good point about the beauty pageant. And something I wanted to point out, we asked the question, should you get your work photographed? And the answer, yes, right? But I'll throw a little caveat in there. Not every project deserves to be photographed.
Well,
you've got maybe your A projects or your B level projects or your C level projects. You still
photograph them. You might not show it, but there might be a reason.
I guess
sometime.
that's the idea, is that, do you well, I mean, I'm approaching this from the smaller scale, the small office sort of idea, and can you really afford to spend some money to get a job photographed that may not be what you want to present either?
Well, the ones that you're talking about there, though, you could go out and buy a decent camera. Not an expensive one, and you can photograph those, right?
Absolutely.
You've got to have something.
Oh yeah, and I'm not saying you don't photograph it at all, but I guess what I'm saying is that, pick and choose your projects, that are going to best show what you want to put out there on your website or in your presentations. You've got to pick your best. Right? Yes. You got to pick the best stuff.
Archiving and marketing.
They're two different things.
Yeah, archiving and marketing, two completely different things. And to photograph, and I think what Evan's trying to get at is photograph all of your projects, and that's for you to archive. But, market
your best projects. Yeah.
Market your best projects.
Or your best images.
And that's what, you spend the money for. That's what because you're right. You're trying to put your best foot forward and show these people exactly what you can do. And so that's what you spend the money for. The old adage of you got to spend money to make money. And in this particular case, it's absolutely true.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what a photographer brings to a photo shoot. Not equipment, but what do they have that we don't when it comes to capturing these images? I mean, obviously there's expertise, but what I've found so many times is, I've seen this building and I can tell the photographer, I want these 3 angles for sure because I know them, right? Like the back of my hand, because I've been working on this for 2 or 3 years already. But I find what a photographer brings is a fresh perspective, right? More often than anything, it's like, number one, photography is about light first and foremost, and that's what photographers know way better than I do.
Oh, yeah.
And that seems to be, not only is it a fresh perspective, but they know when to take that photograph.
Yes,
and I think that is invaluable.
Absolutely. I've got a friend who I used to work with at a firm. She graduated with her architecture degree and now runs a photography business because she's just a phenomenal photographer.
Yeah.
I mean, she may have been trained, but she's just got a natural ability that surpasses a lot of trained photographers that I've seen. She's able to capture light and all this other stuff. Now she does wedding photography, but she also does architectural photography. And the architectural photography, like that corner that you were talking about, you may know that corner, and you know that you want to show that corner, but you'd go up and you just take a photograph of it to get, so that you could show an example of like this well-detailed corner or whatever.
In the dark with your cell phone camera.
Well, yeah, of course. That photographer is going to go up there and they're going to watch that corner. They could watch that corner for an entire day just to say, okay, the best time to get that corner to really speak to you is at this time of day with this time of, this kind of light and this kind of like shadowing to create this kind of depth. And that's what make, the composition of all of those things is what makes a great, photograph. And to be able to understand that is what makes a great photographer. And as much as, and I realize that why we're talking about this is as much as we as architects who are a very creative bunch want to think that we're able to do that, unless you have some kind of training, no, you're not going to be able to catch it the same way.
Yeah.
And
right, because
it's something that's going to really sing to you. And if it's not going to, if you look at it and you're like, that's a great, photograph. It's either a great photograph or a great photograph.
Yeah.
And there really is a difference.
Yeah, I've been on a few photo shoots, and something I really like about them is like, man, I love it when I just tell the photographer, put me to work. What do you need? And I found, when you're doing that, you're automatically going to start seeing your project in new ways. You've got to move furniture around. You might have to crawl around on the floor. You might have to get up to move something here and there, and you're going to work hard. But what I love is, you're doing that, and you're laying on the ground, and you roll over, and you look up, and you just see something that you've never seen because you've never thought to look at your project from that angle. And what I love about it is, this is maybe the last time you're going to see the building, but you're still learning about it, even after it's done, even after you've gone through that whole process. That is such a cool thing. And I think that when we get to tell stories like that through our marketing and through our websites, that's when we start to connect with people. I mean, people want to know about this stuff. They want to know about the experiences that we have. And this is another opportunity to not only tell the story how we've always seen it, but to tell that story in new ways.
Well, something I learned with some of the photography that was taken on some of my projects, because I know the photographer, and we'll have a link in there to his site, but the techniques that he employed, not just say hardware, cameras, lenses, how to get light into certain areas, and how to manipulate it,
right,
so that you can get a good shot. But there was, there's a photograph actually. It's on my website, and it's like the background hero image for my company's Facebook page. But it's an image taken of a porch area in this one building, and when you look at the image, it looks perfect. The line, everything is straight, it's perfectly lined up. But if you've been to the site, you're like, there is no way the human eye can actually see it that way. because, I mean, to us, things, they bend. They as they go out of into our peripheral vision, things start to curve around us, and that the camera sees it that way. And so what was interesting, because I asked him about it, I'm like, how did you get that? I mean, what kind of lens did you use? And he's like, well, used a really wide lens, one, but two, afterwards, there's, techniques and things that they do in Photoshop to kind of straighten certain images and to get that shot looking right.
Yeah. You do some lens correction and
yeah,
all
there's
that kind of stuff.
exactly. And it's like, whoa, holy smoke. I mean, you may, dabble in Photoshop techniques, but I mean, this is hardcore stuff. And it's also very time consuming, but you get a fantastic shot. And it's not like you cheated to get the shot. You just took a good shot that you straightened out, in this case, to make it look right to be an image.
Well, he knows his tools,
And he does know his tools, exactly.
Yeah.
So
and I think that's a huge part of getting great photography, is when that photographer knows their tools so well that they know how to achieve something that you wouldn't even be able to dream of achieving, right?
Oh, yeah, no, exactly. Or, I mean, you'd say, oh, I can't even get that shot because, this porch is like 9 feet deep or something. How do I get this? I don't have lenses for this. And even if you do have a wide lens, it's going to get so distorted at the edge, but anyway, I don't mean to dwell on that, but the idea here is that the photographer brings what you guys were just saying about, being able to, see it with a fresh eye and to be able to see, how the light plays in certain areas that you may not have realized before, even with, modeling it with shading and all of that, in real life, how does this work? And they're going to pick up on that in ways that we don't. And then they can manipulate these images so that they look right when you see the image. Because if you saw the raw image of this particular, porch element, it would be kind of distorted and, it wouldn't look right. Yeah. But the corrected one looks right. And it's like, wow, I had no idea that he had to work so hard to do that. And that's really what you're paying for. It's not necessarily you pay a guy with a fancy camera, so don't think that, okay, I'm going to go buy my,
you're not
D500 and be able to achieve the same thing. You're not.
You're buying the pro. I mean, that's what you're buying.
Well, and it's much the same way. Why are you hiring an architect?
Exactly.
Right? You're hiring the architect because of their expertise and so on and so forth. And maybe we can get into that on another episode. But I mean, that's what you're hiring these guys for.
Yep.
Guys or girls. I'm not to exclude any photographers here.
All right. So I have an opinion on this, but people or no people in your photographs. Because architects don't like people in their photographs.
So here's a comment that I use often when I'm taking pictures. I'll wait and I'll wait and I'll wait until everybody's out of it, and I'll take the photograph, and my wife will say, why don't you want any people in there? It's like, look, if I wanted people in my photographs, I would have designed them in there.
They're just messing it up.
Yeah. She's like, they're in the way. Well, you're always talking about, the human scale and everything. I'm like, yeah. Human scale, out yourself out of my picture.
That's great.
Well, the reason I bring it up, I'm preparing for an enormous interview next week, and we're showing tons of project photography, and it's very apparent when there's no one in the photograph that photograph is all about us. And when you are marketing to somebody, now I know there's times when you don't want anybody in it, right? But when you are marketing to somebody, it should be all about them. And if you don't have people in your photographs, number one, it does look like a rendering, even though there are tons of blurry floating people in lots of renderings out there. But it should be about them, and you want your space. Your architecture is for people, and I think. And this is, I've kind of swayed back and forth on this as I've thought about it for a long time. And I think, like right now, I'm definitely on the side of people. And I can tell the exact same story that you just did. I do the same thing when I'm taking photographs, when I'm just out shooting. But I think this is a big issue that a lot of architects struggle with. There's so many times we see photographs that are just so stark and lifeless. And number one, it's lifeless. Number two, you don't have an idea of the scale sometimes. So there's a lot of issues with that.
Well, as much as I joke about it, I think if you're marketing, I kind of teeter both ways. I do want photographs that are, clean and stark just about the building. If I'm trying to market,
to other architects
about what we're able to do.
Because we do that all the time.
Oh, yeah. Because, we don't make
We're marketing to the wrong people here,
exactly.
Guys. Architects aren't hiring us.
If you, exactly, because they can't afford to. No, if we, people are for renderings, people are not for photos. No, I wanted to say that. Anyway, when you were talking about renderings, I was like, you know what? That's where people should be, in the renderings, not in the photograph. Just get out of the way.
Well, think about putting in a proposal for a new school, and somebody says, show us examples of flexible classrooms, right? And so you're going to show photos of classrooms. I can't tell you a more boring photograph than a classroom with no one in it.
Yeah, because how could you actually tell that it's flexible if you don't see the people who are using the space?
It's a learning
actually
environment.
Using the space, and that's why I was, I may joke about my own personal one. But if you're marketing architecture. You're marketing successful architecture, and successful architecture is only successful with people.
I agree.
And so you really should have people in the picture. To actually, to show scale, to show the use, to show, just to
a sense of movement, people moving through the space, people using it. I mean, and that's really what it's about, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I do think a lot of people struggle with that. And there's a lot of photos that I have with no one in them. Like you said, like I went to Mesa Verde once, National Park. Or National Monument, whatever it is, in Colorado. And I went on this awesome tour where we got to climb up the ladders and go into the cliff dwellings, and I hung out until everybody left. The whole tour had walked on so that I could snap my photos. Because, to me, there, it makes sense. Yeah, I don't want anyone in it. It's a ruin, right? It doesn't deserve to have people in it anymore. In these photographs, these are artistic photographs that I want to take. But it was painful to wait. And if someone stepped into that photograph, oh my gosh, it was like, oh, you're ruining my shot.
You bastard.
But when it comes to my own projects and the marketing aspect of it, man, yeah, you want people in there. It's nice to have people in reflections of glazing and all that stuff. It's not. It doesn't always have to be someone right in the middle of the shot. They could be halfway on and halfway off, like walking into the scene or anything, just to give you a sense of the humanity of the architecture.
We could have a completely different topic to talk about, and it could be, how can you tell an architect on a tour of a building? Because they're the last person in line, and they're always,
true.
Come on, people, let's go.
Looking up.
They're like snapping off shots.
And they're always looking up and bumping into people because they're not paying attention to where they're going, right?
Well, yeah, that too.
Oh, that's just everybody walking and texting, Neil. I think you're mistaken.
Oh, no, then you're looking down.
Yeah,
not
true.
up.
Well, and I don't want to get off topic here, but I actually, so yesterday went to a job site, had our progress meeting and everything else. And so, before we went back to the office, was having lunch, and I was asking the girl that's working with me, she's a recent graduate, and we're sitting down, and I noticed that she's looking around the room, the building, looking at all of the details and stuff, and we all do the same thing. And I asked her if her perspective from the way that she used to view spaces before architecture school and now in the profession has changed now that she's been schooled on trying to understand and design spaces. And, I guess, again, completely off topic from where we're going, but, it's just kind of interesting that we're all talking about the architect kind of, wandering off and looking up and looking around and just looking at all these different views. And so to kind of bring it home to what we're talking about, if we're always looking at how the spaces look and feel, and we're always looking at the people and how they're engaging in the space, why not go ahead and put them in the photograph? Why not be able to convey and show that idea that the space, this is how you use the space, or this is how other people use the space?
Yeah. Well, one thing that we run up against working in the public sector is there's a lot of times where we can't have anybody in our photographs.
Well, that's
right?
True. You're not allowed to photograph.
You're not allowed to.
Kids.
Yep, yeah, exactly. And the other thing that we run up against is that we're working usually up to a deadline where these spaces need to be occupied by a certain date, right? And when is that project getting finished? The day before. So when do you photograph it? So you typically, this is the total anal side of architecture, but it's like, I don't want a picture of that classroom after that teacher's crapped it up.
You took what I was about to say. You get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm ready to go take some photographs, and you walk in and the teacher's got all of her boxes in there and she's got crap up on the wall and
Beanie Babies on the desk, and
and you're just like, come on. Just one day, all I wanted to do was take some photographs of the desks in place and in line and, all this other stuff. But now you got your, multicolor ABCs all over the dang wall.
Yep.
And
that's
then
why
you
I say
and
when
think,
you
you're
go
like,
with the
wait.
photographer, it's a lot of work because you're putting all that stuff, hiding it right behind the desk that you're taking a picture of. And then when you're done, you're putting it all back.
Well, we've talked about photography, why it's important to our buildings, and why it's important for marketing. But let's get to the second part here of something, where we started today. Do we care about the buildings after it's been photographed?
Yeah. Do we?
Yeah, I do. In fact,
How much do you care?
I visit a lot of my buildings.
Do you?
I'm weird about that. I go to my buildings all the time, even the ones that I can't stand, because I'm curious to see how. Because again, I didn't build it for me.
Yep.
So I want to see how, if it's successful, what I can do better. I don't know. It's.
Well, usually goals. There's goals way beyond just making the building, right?
Yeah.
One of the
Absolutely.
biggest goals typically is you want to transform the enterprise that occupies it. This is a chance for them to redefine who they are. And how are you going to find out if you did that, if you were successful? Right? It's by doing what you're talking about.
Yeah. I always make kind of just this mental pact with myself. And, the old firm that I used to work for, they always go back to their buildings 1 year later. Mm-hmm. And I've always, carried that with me. And I always visit, for absolute certain, I always visit at least 1 year later. I want to kind of see how, the bugs have been worked out. People have settled in.
Oh, you mean it's not perfect?
Yeah. And you can go in there and you can look at it. And it's actually, it's long enough time to have forgotten all of the pains of construction administration. It's going to take me a while on this particular project in Annapolis for me to kind of go back. I'm going to go back multiple times to see this building, but I'm going to go back in the more, once I finish it up before the school of next year, the school year of next year. And I'm going to remember all of the different skeletons that are hidden in those closets. And I think that going after a year, going after 2 years and things like that, you've put all of that stuff behind you, and now you're actually seeing the building almost again for the first time as a building and not as part of the process. So you're able to start to really kind of appreciate the building for what it is now and not what it was and what it did to you through that whole process.
You've healed.
Yeah, you've healed,
The trauma's gone.
Yeah, I mean, all I can think of right now, every time I go out to the building, isn't, don't get me wrong, I enjoy going out to all of these different meetings and stuff, and sure, they're kind of, a chore, and, the answering of the RFIs and all the blah, 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 and everything else. I still go out there with excitement every time I go out and see it because, as it, more pieces get added to it and more things get closed up, you can start to see your vision kind of unfold. But that aside, it's still all part of the process. And so that's why I always go and visit projects, because I want to start to see them as what they were intended to be. Now, the user, they're going to come in and they're going to come right into the building exactly what you were hoping it would be. Brand new building, fresh eyes, fresh impression.
New car smell.
The new car smell, right. And we don't have that. We have the, kind of like night sweats of the feasibility study and the, schematic design and the whole process. And I think, to give ourselves the opportunity, we got to go back.
I think you're right, Cormac. We should, obviously, and especially doing the type of work that you and Evan do more in the public sector and school work and things like that. I think it's critical, right? You have to educate yourself on what worked, what didn't work, because at least when you're, I'm assuming, when you're doing these schools, sometimes you're trying out different things, or you're trying to see what works, what doesn't work, and things of that nature. In my line of work that I've spent most of my career doing in production housing, we rarely get the opportunity, to see our work, because it's oftentimes built out of town. And sometimes, you do go visit it, but to a certain extent, a lot of the finish work, a lot of the detailing, you're not on the job site. You're not being asked a lot of questions, from the contractor. You're very much removed. So it's a different sort of, work. But even in my own smaller projects, sometimes it's a little tough because, you're usually dealing with people's houses and,
private places. Yeah.
It's their private places. And so it's not something you just drop in. Hey, how you doing? I want to come walk through the house. Although when I have done that, they're usually very excited to see you, and they're, oh, look how this turned out. This is great.
Well, it gives you a chance
stuff like that.
You've got to touch base with those people.
You do.
And I think
it's good marketing, right?
It's a huge deal when it comes to that, staying in touch,
Right.
It gives you a great chance to ask them, so how's this working out?
Right.
How did what did we do right? What did we do wrong? There's going to be things that they didn't want to do that you wanted to do.
Right.
Or vice versa. And it gives you a chance to talk about that. I also, again, I think this is something that Mark LePage brought up as well. I think his position on this was that he feels like, well, maybe it's just part of his process. He becomes really good friends with these people. And so I'm sure he gets invited back. People that I work with, they get invited over to the houses that they've designed, because they're just turned into really good friends with the people. And I think, wow, that's an awesome testament to that process and what they went through and what everybody kind of endured together, because everybody knows that it is difficult. It can also be extremely rewarding. So if we are doing our jobs and we're really listening, then I think we do care after the photos have been taken, and we do go back, because there is a lot to learn, and there's just relationships that have been built, and hopefully hopefully nurtured during that time and not being completely broken. So I personally don't think a lot of architects do go back. I personally think that most of them don't care after the photos have been taken, but we should, as an industry, we should be caring about that kind of thing, I think.
We should care, and I'll be the first to admit I don't do it very often, though. I should do it, and for all the reasons that we've talked about, but to a certain extent, I don't know what it is, but it depends. Maybe it's just a smaller scale, little addition or something that I'm doing, that I have done the last few years. I don't often get an opportunity, and to a certain extent, it's like I haven't recreated the wheel here, and it's just I have very little interest to go back and see it. So, shame on me, bad architect, but sometimes I'm done with it. And maybe that's just, this is, part of this opinion is coming from the fact the last few years, it's been really difficult to find work. And oftentimes the little bit of work you're getting isn't very glamorous. And sometimes, it doesn't work. Sometimes projects don't work out that well, right? I mean, that does happen. And that could be a topic for another episode about, what do you do when things go, squirrely on you on a project, and you're not being invited back, and you're not good friends and having barbecues with your clients on the weekends. But to a certain extent, it's like, I'm done with that. It's time to move on, and next project up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wonder if it's in listening to what you were talking about earlier about kind of the production house, and how basically you kind of cranked it out, and it was something that was being built, completely void of you, that you don't necessarily have that intimate emotional connection to the building.
Absolutely.
Where I've spent now, on this one project now, I'm on, my 5th year of this project, and it'll be 6 years by the time it's done. And it's 6 years that throughout the entire, 6 times 365 days has been me not every day, but, dedicated to this project. And, so I've been living it, so I mean, it really is almost like a kid, so I have an emotional attachment to it. And I wonder if, Evan, even the point that you bring up is, do they care? Is it's not that they necessarily care, it's just they never really developed that emotional attachment to it that, you or I may have on, like some of the projects that we work on, that there's a lot that goes into, like doing a school, for instance. I mean, you get involved with the teachers, you get involved with the principals, you get involved with like the, kind of like the daily life of some of these kids. I'm going to see these kindergartners that when I started this project, when they return to this building, will be 5th graders.
Yeah.
Wow. And I saw them as little 5-year-old babies, and now they're going to be 10-year-olds. And it's going to be, I mean, it's going to be amazing to kind of see them walk in and, kind of like wide-eyed and just like, oh, wow, look at this. Because I remember when I presented it to them when they were in 3rd grade, and I presented and said, in 2 years when you go back to this school as a 5th grader, this is what you're going to, see. And, it was just this amazing reaction. So I kind of have, almost this very intimate, emotional connection to these buildings that I do. And so that's probably why I do care a little bit more about them, that, I do want to see and learn from, what I'm doing. And I think that, if I was just doing, kind of like just this cranking stuff up, I may not. I don't know.
No, I would agree with you, Cormac. I think there's definitely a different level of emotional investment in the type of work you're doing compared to what I've spent more of my career doing. So, yeah, there's definitely that. But in addition, I still sometimes, when I'm done with the project, I'm ready to move on.
Yeah, I think that there's a little bit of that in every project, but it's something definitely worth talking about. So, you guys want to wrap this up?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right.
Cormac needs to get to bed. It's getting pretty late for him anyway. Although you're probably listening to this at Monday morning and driving to work, but that's not when we're necessarily recording. So on that note, if you have any questions or comments, please visit the website at archispeakpodcast.com. There you'll find links to the Archispeak Podcast Twitter account, our individual Twitter accounts, and the Archispeak Facebook page. We enjoy hearing from our listeners as well, so call and leave us a message at 415-484-8496. And also don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes. We especially love those.
That's right. All right, guys.
Thanks for listening.
All right, we'll talk to you later.
Thank you very much.
It's open you can bet